Om Sthapakaya cha dharmasya sarvadharmaswarupine avatara varishtaya Ramakrishnaya te namaha. So we are continuing with the discussion of Ramanuja's philosophy. Now Ramanuja's philosophy is very significant in the philosophy of religion because the most elaborate articulation of ritualistic bhakti, a graphic description of the stage-by-stage evolution of the human mind in the path of devotion was articulated by Ramanuja in his, mostly in his Gita Bhashya and also in his relatively small books, Gadyatraya, that is Vaikuntha Gadya, Sriranga Gadya and Sharanagati Gadya. In fact, he wrote a work exclusively devoted to Sharanagati, or Prapatti, or self-surrender. You find, when you read Ramanuja's books, Ramanuja's ideas, you find many of them seem to have influenced the later developments of devotional practices in Christian mysticism. You can find, for example, in the writings of the Saint John of Cross or Saint Teresa of Avila, you can find, especially in the writings of Spanish mystics, many of these ideas. So I'm just, before going further, before going to the more profound and philosophical intricacies of Ramanuja's interpretation of Upanishad, that's a very important part. In fact, in the Vedat Sangraha and also in Sribhashya and his commentary in Sudha Prakashika by Sudarsana Suri, you can find very profound articulations and descriptions, explanations of Upanishad mantras according to his system of philosophy. But here we are going to conclude this, his ideas, the discussion of his ideas of devotion and self-surrender. So that's what we are right now. Now let's, Vaikuntha Gadya. Vaikuntha Gadya is one of the three Gadyas, Gadyatrayas, that is Sriranga Gadya, Vaikuntha Gadya and Sharanagati Gadya. In Vaikuntha Gadya you find, for example, a statement which actually describes that a devotee who is in the habit of chanting Daya Mantra. So you can find Daya Mantra. I'm going to describe this in course of time. The description of this Rahasya. He has got Rahasya, which includes articulation of mantras and all that. So we will describe that later. So anyway, so the point is, you can find he describes this. For example, Paramapurusham Bhagavantam Narayanam Swamittvena Suhurtvena Gurutvena cha Parigrihya Srimat Charanaravinda Yugalam Anyatma Sanjeevanena Tadandar Darshana Bhavanena Sharanam Anuvrajit. So this is his idea. So Paramapurusham Bhagavantam Narayanam Swamittvena Suhrutvena Gurutvena cha Parigrihya. So we have to accept the Lord as our eternal teacher, our master, and also as our close friend. So you can find those especially Christian Catholics, especially those who have read the works of the works of Saint John of the Cross, and also Saint Teresa of Avila's autobiographical writings, Inner Castle, and also, more interestingly, in some of the writings of the Russian mystics, in the Philokalia and in the Way of a Pilgrim, you find this idea of total surrender, continuous chanting of mantra, and then an idea of completely surrendering oneself to the Lord and His will. So this is essentially a very important part of the actual discipline of the followers of Ramanuja. Now again I want to emphasize one point. All these ideas you find in Shankaracharya's devotional hymns. But Ramanuja, it becomes an intricate philosophical exposition. But in Shankaracharya's stotras, for example, devotional hymns, you find this idea of total surrender, the Lord, or depending upon whether there is a female archetype of the divine or male archetype of the divine. You find that it is Devya Paradhakshamavana Sutra, asking for apology, for asking for excuse for the sins committed, for the mistakes made to the Divine Mother. You can find all these in Shankaracharya's stotras, but not in his articulation of Advaita philosophy. You don't find it there. But in Ramanuja, you find in his own independent works on devotion like Sharanagati Gadya, and also in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. So, but at the same time, Ramanuja could not or did not write a single line comparable to the ecstasy of devotion that you find in Shankaracharya's devotional poetry. That's something very interesting. The greatest philosopher wrote the most profound devotional poetry. And the greatest devotional philosopher, like Ramanuja, could not write anything comparable to the devotional ecstasy that you find in Shankaracharya's poetical works. It's a very interesting topic for study. So he's here, for example, here he says, one should devote oneself, one should completely dedicate oneself to the Lord and consider Him as the closest friend, and also as one's dearest and nearest. That's what you find here. There is Swamittvena, Suhrutvena, Gurutvena. God is your ultimate teacher, His ultimate master, Swami, and also the ultimate friend. And in fact, to go further in this subject, he talks about this Rahasyatraya, the three mysteries. That is, three mysteries which include one mantra, Mula mantra, and Dvaya, and Charama Sloka. It's a very, very interesting. So very elaborate articulation. More like the devotional philosophical structure of the later Christian mystics. But everything is given a very articulate, well-organized philosophical superstructure, you find. So the Shastra, according to him, according to Ramanuja, the canonical works of Ramanuja's system deal with three important aspects. A triple philosophy of the absolute reality, that is, Sriman Narayana is the only ultimate reality, Parabrahman, and Saguna Sakara, Savishesha, Saguna Parabrahman. God defined as an anthropomorphic, supreme reality who is present in everything, everywhere in this world, at the same time who is distinct from everything in this world. So there is Apratak Siddhi. In the Shankaracharya system, that divine principle is inherent in everything, and the essence of everything is that inherent principle, that absolute reality. If you exclude the body-mind complex and all the paraphernalia associated with the jivas, individual souls, then the essence of everyone and everything in this world is Brahman. Jiva Brahmaiva Napara, you find. So according to Ramanuja, again, so a canonical work, a scripture essentially deal with the philosophy of reality and the goal to achieve and attain the reality, and also the way for the good of the soul to get out of this transmigratory cycle. So this is also an important thing, especially when we discuss this with Western students. The idea that the jiva, this individual soul, is going through this cycle, transmigratory cycle, called samsara, which again you find in Buddhism. So, birth, life, death, and rebirth, this continuous movement along a cycle or a wheel. This is considered to be a big bondage in Vedanta or in mainstream Indian spiritual traditions. So one should get out of this. The way to get out of this is to attain our true nature. In Advaita Vedanta, the way to get out of this is to be free from this bondage by the grace of the Lord, according to Ramanuja system. In a distant way, we can say this idea of looking at this world of worldly life as a bondage, as something that we should get out of by the grace of God, which could mean entering the kingdom of heaven in Christian tradition. Again, something we want to get out of. We are considering this life, empirical life of birth, life, death and rebirth as a burden, as a problem to be got rid of, as a bondage that should be got rid of. That idea you find everywhere. So in the Ramanuja system, the main purpose of any canonical literature, canonical work, any spiritual scripture is to deal with this subject, the philosophy of the absolute reality and a clear articulation of the goal and a way to reach this goal. The way to reach this goal is prapatti. If you pray, if a devotee pray to the Lord with a sense of self-surrender, for bhakti, God gives him bhakti or devotion. But if a devotee prays, if he does prapatti, sharanagati or self-surrender, if he practices self-surrender for liberation, then God will give him liberation. Liberation from this transmigratory cycle. Which is roughly, if you want to see parallelisms, you can see, for example, entering the kingdom of heaven also, in Christian tradition or other traditions. Now here, he talks about the three rahasyas, three mysteries. So the knowledge of this work, Shastram, that is knowledge of the philosophy of the absolute reality, the goal, and also the means to reach that goal. It is enshrined in three mysteries, Rahasyatraya. The three mysteries are one mantra and one dvaya, the other is Charamasloka. So, of course, this is very interesting, and Ramanuja philosophers quote one important verse from Vishnu Purana, which is a much earlier work. That is, Tavadarthastada vancha tavan mohas tatha sukham yavan nayadi saranam tvamavasesha avasasanam. So then he talks about, Ramanuja talks about, he elaborates this in his Vaikuntha Gedya. That is three aspects. One is Mula Mantra. You can see more like, and they keep repeating this mantra. Very similar. I think the nearest approximation may be the repeated prayer. So what is called prayer, short prayers, which they go on repeating all the time, especially in the Russian mystical tradition, you can find a way of a pilgrim, or you find. Sometimes we hear of some saints who lived in some isolated places in islands, in extreme cold, practicing extreme austerity, doing nothing except chanting one mantra, you find. So Ramanuja said, for example, Om Namo Narayanaya. This is Mula mantra. Normally we don't, and interestingly, the Ramanuja system, it is well known, they publicize it. In certain traditions, these mantras are not clearly publicized. Dvaya means Sriman Narayana Charano Saranam Prabhadhi Srimade Narayanaya Namaha. This again, one is clear articulation that I am surrendering myself to the Lord, Sriman Narayana. Charamasloka. Charamasloka is again, that is Sarvadharman Paritejya Mamayakam Saranam Vraja Aham Tva Sarvapabebhyo Mokshayishyami Mahasucha. This Charamasloka is taken from the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which Ramanuja is considered to be the essence or the last statement of Bhagavad Gita. The 66th chapter, the 66th chapter, 66th sloka or verse of 18th chapter, chapter number 18, and verse number 66, that is called Charamasloka. The last and the most important verse in the Bhagavad Gita, which articulates the process of self-surrender. That is, Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Saranam Praja Aham Tvata Sarvapabebhyo Mokshayishyami Mahasucha. Again, if you read English translation, you may never get this idea. Totally different. Sometimes you may get all misleading ideas. If you read an English translation, they will tell you, you give up all dharmas and surrender to the Lord. That's not real meaning. So giving up dharma is certainly not a very desirable thing to do. The implication here is, you give up all thoughts about practicing different disciplines, like karma yoga, bhakti yoga, and so on, and you consider yourself to be a destitute, totally incapable of taking care of your own spiritual destiny. So this kind of total surrender, out of the conviction that the devotee himself cannot achieve anything, he is totally incapable of anything. So, one dedicates oneself to the Lord. I can tell you in this context something interesting. When Swami Vivekananda returned to India, some of his own brother disciples and others asked him, "So you are preaching Advaita Vedanta in the West, the central teaching of Advaita, that the humanity is one spiritual family. We are capable of achieving whatever we want if we identify ourselves with the eternal divine principle that is present in all of us. Instead of identifying ourselves as body-mind complex, if we assert our spiritual identity that I am Atman, I am perfect, and everything is an expression of the Atman." So, this is what Swamiji taught, and the concept of spiritual freedom. We should be free, freedom with a capital letter underlined, spiritual freedom. That's what Swamiji was articulating all over America. So when Swamiji returned to India, some devotees and also some householder devotees of Sri Ramakrishna and some of his own brother disciples asked him, "You did not teach Sri Ramakrishna the concept of bhakti and surrender to Sri Ramakrishna. Instead, you are teaching this Advaita Vedanta and all that." So, as Swamiji answered, "See, do you think that if I have talked to them about self-surrender, like Ramanuja's teaching, they would be impressed? They had an overdose of this literature. So if you read all the Spanish mystics, Italian mystics, that's what you find. Russian mystics, Philokalia, that's what you find. An overdose of self-surrender, which the Europeans and Americans did not take very seriously. That's what, in a funny way, Swamiji says. After they were active, do you think the Europeans would have taken very seriously and started going around looking for sea routes to the east and west? Columbus came here, Cortes and Pizarro came to the southern parts of American continent, and Vasco da Gama reached India. They would not have undertaken all these dangerous missions if they had practiced devotion. That's what it's a Ramanuja system. So if you read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, you find Sri Ramakrishna instructs his disciples and devotees according to what they need. So to some, Sri Ramakrishna recommended Advaita, like Swami Vivekananda. And some others, Sri Ramakrishna asked you go and pray to Divine Mother. And for Hazra, a man, he did not preach much, he did not teach much bhakti. He asked you go back and take care of your family. That's your duty, primary duty. So when you read the Ramanuja system, you find something very interesting. That prapatti is total self-surrender. And you should be constantly chanting these mantras and give up everything. So you get bhakti through prapatti if you pray for bhakti. But if you pray for moksha and do prapatti means self-surrender, you get moksha or liberation. And another interesting thing Ramanuja says, if you surrender to the will of the Lord, you get everything you need in this world. Dharma, artha, kama and moksha. So you can work hard, you can achieve whatever you want in this empirical world. So and also you get the means to achieve those things. So kama and artha, kama. Dharma, artha, kama, and eventually through prapatti, for liberation you get moksha also. That is Ramanuja's thesis. So very, very interesting. And now, I want, before concluding this subject, before entering a much more intricate subject, that is Ramanuja's concepts, his philosophical concepts based on his interpretation of the Upanishadic statements that you find in Sri Bhashya. Before that, we will just make a comparison of bhakti, devotion and self-surrender. So bhakti or devotion needs a lot of tools, lot of instruments. You need to practice certain rituals, and in order to practice rituals, we need to follow certain traditions. You should study scriptures, and you should study scriptures from authentic teachers. And also you should practice karma yoga. You should go on doing something good for others. Also you should do some service in temples or in holy places. All these will help us slowly to develop devotion or bhakti. Turning the mind towards God. Prapatti or self-surrender is a single movement of the mental emotional system. You are convinced that God alone can protect you, and then you are convinced that you cannot yourself do anything, so you are totally helpless, so you take total surrender to the Lord. And that immediately produces the result. The result is immediately you feel that your responsibility is entirely in the hands of the Lord. So these are three important things that we have to keep in mind about Ramanuja system. So I think I have already explained some of these important things. Of course, remember, I mentioned this Mula Mantra, the mysteries and all that. These are mostly certain practices done by Sri Vaishnavites in their own devotional life. Now we'll look for something else, and that's very important. I want to take up some subjects which are maybe philosophically more challenging. So now Ramanuja's system articulates the idea of an ultimate reality posited as an anthropomorphic God with attributes more like the God expounded in the Judeo-Christian tradition, who is compassionate, who is taking care of your affairs and who listens to your prayers, who is a repository of all conceivable human qualities. Human qualities, when they reach a level of perfection, they become divine qualities. Sagala Guna Kalyana Nidhi is a repository of all auspicious qualities. And one of the most important aspects of this reality is he is the inner controller of everything in this world. That means Sarva Niyanta. Niyanta means the one who regulates, who controls, who takes care of a situation. And many of these ideas are developed on the basis of very profound Upanishad mantras, which are clearly Advaitic. But Ramanuja, that's why Ramanuja had to depend upon many of the mantras, which are clearly Advaitic. So Ramanuja's system becomes Vishishtadvaita. So we are going to discuss some of those very important mantras. One important verse, it is in Brihadaranyaka. Tadantaryaminam ya imam chalokam param chalokam sarvani cha bhudani yontaro yamayeti. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad you find for 3rd chapter, 7th Brahmana you can find in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So I shall try to explain some of these very, very famous statements. They are highly philosophical, and if you want to, those who are interested can read Shankaracharya's own commentary. The mantra is this, that is, Subravit Patanjalam Kapyam Yatnigam Cha Vedattum Cha Kapyastam Andaryaminam Ya Imam Lokam Param Cha Lokam Sarvani Cha Bhudani Yamantaro Yamayati iti. This is the mantra. So, this absolute reality, do you know this absolute reality? Who is the controller? Who is the regulator of everything in this world and is controlling as the inner resident? So, do you know this absolute reality? It's a discussion here. So, the discussion is between Yajnavalkya, and there's a debate going on in a great assembly of scholars. So this mantra continues, and then it says, for Yajnavalkya says, Ye Pradhivyam Tishtan Pradhivyam Nantaraha, Ye Pradhivina Veda Yesi Pradhivi Sharidam Ye Pradhivi Manduro Yamayadi, Eshate Atma Andaryami Amritaha. So Eshate Atma Andaryami Amritaha. This is a conclusion. This is your Atman, this is your essence. And it is residing within you. It is eternal. And there is one absolute reality, which is Prithivyam Tishtan. It is existing on earth. But if you say, well, Atman is existing on earth, you can say trees and mountains are Atman. So in order to avoid that possible misinterpretation, the Upanishad says, Prithivyahantaraka, it is within the earth. In that case, suppose somebody tells you the eternal reality is everywhere on earth. you may think there are many things on earth. So many external things. Trees and mountains and valleys and so on. So it becomes what you call pantheism. And you find in the words of William Wordsworth or Emerson and others. That's not the highest interpretation. So, in order to avoid that possible misinterpretation, the Upanishad tells you, Prithivyaha Antaraha. It is within the earth, within earth. In that case, there are many things under the earth, gold ore, iron ore, and so on. So, in order to avoid that possible misinterpretation, the Upanishad tells you, Yem Prithivina Veda, that doesn't know about it. And then, but this earth or this cosmos is its body, its vehicle, its instrument for its manifestation. So, it is everywhere on this earth, but it is within the earth. Earth means within external natural phenomena. And this earth or external objects, this external phenomenal world, doesn't know about it. And everything in this world is only a vehicle for its expression. And yaha prithivim antaro yamayati. So, prithivim yamayati means it controls everything in this world. How? Being seated, being present in everything, it controls, regulates everything. And that Atman itself, that Atman alone is your true identity. That Atman is your identity. Now this mantra continues. Yaha apsutishtan adbhonantaraha yam apona viduhu yasya abashariram. Like that continues, It exists in water, but it is within water. The water doesn't know about it. But then water is only an expression for its manifestation. It's only an expression. And it controls everything existing within water and so on. Again, yandarikshetishtan, antarikshadantaraha. Again, it exists in atmosphere. And it is within the atmosphere. It is its existence is not known to atmosphere. It exists everything within. Like that, it controls everything. This mantra continues for several mantras. And then finally, and Ramanuja will take up this as an important statement. This is possibly one of the most profound Upanishad mantras, which can be called a thesis for Ramanuja's idea of Antaryamitvam, means the inherent nature of his supreme reality. So the mantra is Yaha sarveshu bhudeshu tishtan sarvebhyo bhudebhyo antaraha yam sarvani bhudani na viduhu yasya sarvani bhudani shariram yas sarvani bhudani antaro yamayadi eshate atma antaryami amrdaha ityadi bhudam atadhyatmam. Those of you are interested, you can read this mantra, 15th mantra of 3rd chapter of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, 7th Brahmana. So the Upanishad is divided into different chapters. Each chapter has got many Brahmanas, it may be called sections, and every section has got a number of mantra. This is 15th mantra of the 3rd chapter and the 7th section. It is very famous. What it says is, Ramanuja says that this is a mantra that tells you that God is present in everything and God is the controller. Now, this is perfectly okay in Advaita also. But Ramanuja will tell you, God is the active controller. He is in charge of the world. More like the preachings of the typical modern evangelical teaching. God is in charge, God is taking care of you, God is looking at you. God would take no nonsense. So be careful. You cannot deceive God because He has an eye on everything. That kind of thing you find here. So a statement which clearly tells you about a supreme divine principle which is inherent in everything. That mantra becomes an authentic articulation of the supreme reality who is an active controller, very similar to the idea of God who is sitting above the clouds, taking a close look at what you are doing and absolutely taking no nonsense for an answer. This is the idea behind. So this is how Indian Vedantins, they interpret the same mantra from different angles. So this is very famous. So Ramanuja says, this Atman is so he called it Sarvaniyanta, is a controller. So controlling happens, according to Advaita, controlling happens through omnipresence, through immanence. So the divine principle Atman is omnipresent, all pervading, through immanence, present in everything. At the same time, that Atman is not actively involved, kartrutva and bhoktrutva. But in Ramanuja's system, that Atman as God is actively involved in controlling everything in this world. So, Brahman has these qualities of Sarvaniyantritva is one of the important attributes of Ramanuja's idea of God. Sarvaniyantritva, I mean the ability, the status and position of being the controller of everything in this world. And not only that, everything happens because the permission that you receive from God. So this God permits you to exercise your freedom by means of Anumatritva. I mean, He gives you permission. And then the God will give you a work, a duty, and assigns a result for that duty, either pleasure or pain, according to His choice. So this idea behind everything comes from God as a gift from God. So He is controlling everything. He gives you some freedom. Within the freedom you act, you do things according to your samskaras, your culture, your characteristics. So Jiva is free to either obey or to transgress the commands or to disobey the commands of the divine teacher, divine ruler. But if you obey the commands of the Lord, then you move upward in spiritual evolution. If you disobey, you move downward. So according to how you respond to God's command, you get pain or pleasure. So for example, in one of there is a well-known sutra in Brahma Sutra, Sri Bhashya, he says, Kridaya prayatna apekshastu vihida pradishidha vayathyadibhya. So, sarvasu kriyasu purushena kridam prayatnam udyogam apeksha antaryami paramatma tad anumadidanena pravartayati. Paramatma anumadi mantarena asya pravarti na upapadyate. It's a very famous statement in Sri Bhashya. So God gives you permission. God gives you some freedom. And according to the way you respond to God's freedom, how you exercise your freedom, you get pain and pleasure. Pain or pleasure. But something very interesting that is found in Ramanuja system compared to other monotheistic system is there is absolutely no idea of exclusivism as you find in later schools of Vaishnavism, for example, in the Chaitanya system, at least in later years, Baladeva's work on Brahma Sutras, you find exclusivism of finality of Krishna as you find in the other Vaishnava schools. You don't find in Ramanuja. Ramanuja is totally free from that kind of exclusivism. But again he says that God is the controller. He is present in everything. Being present in everything, He controls everything. And He gives you the freedom. So in some works, the freedom is explained. A cow is tied to a tree in the middle of a ground, plenty of grass around. The freedom of the cow depends upon the length of the rope. So the cow can move around the pillar or the tree and eat enough grass in that area. If the cow lays down and doesn't make use of what is given, then the owner will not take the cow to another place. It will have to stay there till it exhausts eating the grass because that is given to it. So these are some of the illustrations that you find in the later Ramanuja writers. So God gives you freedom, and it's for us to make use of the freedom. So that's why, this Anumadi Danena Paramatma Anumadi Mantarena Asya Pravritti na Vavadyate. So Paramatma Tad Anumadi Dharena Pravartayati. So God is making you work by giving you freedom, by giving you permission. And without God's permission, you cannot do anything in this world. In fact, this is a natural approach in Bhakti tradition. This is a classical Bhakti tradition or devotional philosophy found in all monotheistic systems, including Ramanuja system. Nothing happens in this world without God's will. In devotion, in devotional philosophy, this is the natural approach, the only approach possible. But in Advaita, also this is present but in a different way. Once we get out of our identity with this body-mind complex, which is due to avidya or ignorance, once we get out of this total identity with our own physical body, which also creates a lot of selfish desires, so we do everything only for our own purpose, our own selfish desires. So long as that's what is happening, there is no progress. But the moment we, through spiritual practice, which also includes devotion, in fact, all the devotional exercises mentioned in the Ramanuja system are fully and completely accepted in Advaita. This is a very important point to remember. All these spiritual disciplines, including self-surrender, are perfectly okay in Advaita, because practice of these disciplines will help us to reach a state where we can actually go even beyond and understand the presence of the divine within ourselves and experience our own identity with the divine, total non-distinction. So all these are means in Advaita also. That's why you find many of the great Advaitins are also great bhaktas, great devotees. They practice devotion. They may not have reached, in spiritual experience, they may not have reached the highest identification with Brahman. So they are reading books, what we call vichara. They contemplate on the meaning, sadhana chatushthaya sampatti they practice. For example, the total strong conviction that Brahman is only reality, and then everything else is relative, giving up the relative. Then you naturally develop all the spiritual characteristics, shamadhamadi, sarka sambatti, and then you are always propelled, to move forward, inspired to move forward by a strong desire for liberation, then you read scriptures, contemplate, and also practice bhakti, devotion, etc. Are very good, because they will take you to a state of chitta shuddhi or mental purity. And when we reach that stage, then we realize the Supreme Brahman. You can find in Sri Ramakrishna's own life. Sri Ramakrishna was a devotee, the greatest devotee of Divine Mother that you can, in the recorded history of India, was Sri Ramakrishna. He was so devoted to Kali, the Divine Mother. And then finally he was practicing Advaita under Totapuri. So it became so natural to him to be always thinking of Divine Mother, I mean God in a general way. And then Divine Mother form doesn't disappear. So Totapuri, the teacher, instructed Sri Ramakrishna to pierce a piece of glass on his forehead and asked him to concentrate on that. And immediately Sri Ramakrishna reached Advaita Samadhi, means he crossed the barrier of the idea of God with form. So all the practices mentioned here are perfectly okay. You find many of the Advaitins practice this kind of devotion, this kind of total surrender. Actually, Sudarsana Suri, in his well-known book that is called Sutta Prakashika. Sutta Prakashika is the Sudarsana Suri's commentary on Sri Bhashya. He has summarized all these teachings in a few verses, which of course we need not go through all this. So he talks about this, the importance of making use of God's grace for our own spiritual destiny. So once we make use of what God has given us as a gift, using our own resources to practice devotion and to practice prapatti, self-surrender, then naturally we will have an inclination to pray for liberation, or rather to practice prapatti for liberation. At stage one may pray to God for this, for purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. Dharma is the regulating ethical principle. Artha and kama constitute the values related to achieving worldly desires, fulfilling worldly desires in this empirical world. Money, wealth, status, long life, all these are natural. Nothing wrong in aspiring for them, nothing wrong in having desires for status, wealth and so on. So what one must do? One must try hard to achieve all this with full faith in God, but practicing dharma, I mean not deviating from the path of dharma or ethics or spiritual morality. And then at some point a spiritual seeker will develop a desire for something higher, and he will go to moksha. Ramanuja makes a statement in his commentaries that's a very, very useful and very practical instruction. Suppose a devotee, let's say, he is praying for job, promotion, for wealth, status, nothing wrong in it. We should not imagine that everyone should pray for moksha or spiritual enlightenment. That doesn't happen. Normally, when you lose your job, you pray for God's grace so that you get a new job. If you have any financial problems, you pray to God so that you will get a good job, higher salary and so on. It's natural. If you have any ailments, one may pray for health. Ramanuja will tell you nothing wrong in it. So you sincerely pray to God for all this. Then after some time, when your prayers are answered, when your prayers are fulfilled, then out of your gratitude to the Lord, to God, you'll continue the same prayerful attitude. So you prayed for long life or health because you have an ailment. So you feel now your God has given you His grace, His blessing, so your health, you have recovered your health. So you become grateful. So you don't discontinue your devotional practices. You continue it out of a sense of gratitude. And then you start practicing the same devotion, the same prayerful attitude without any selfish motive. So you graduate, you evolve to another higher level of spiritual life. And maybe not in this life, maybe in next life, one may also pray for the highest liberation. So every attempt to turn our mind to God, Swamittvena, Suhritvena and Gurutvena. You can think of God as a teacher, as your friend, or as your master. In whatever way, whatever you have in your mind, if you turn your mind to God, that will certainly give you bhakti, devotion. Not self-surrender, not prapatti. Prapatti comes at a much later stage. But one may begin with bhakti and eventually one may reach prapatti. If not in this life, in next life. So it's a very interesting and very psychologically very fulfilling approach you find in Ramanuja system. You can have questions, you are most welcome. And we'll continue discussion next class.
Hello, Swami.
Yeah.
I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
Did you, in the course of your talk, that if one follows the path of Ramanuja, that one would actually also, only with Ramanuja's path, not incorporating Shankara, one would achieve the state of Nirvikalpa Samadhi and the ultimate Advaita experience? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah. No, Ramanuja may not agree with you. I am a student of all these philosophical spiritual systems. So the reason is, I tell you, you raised a very important question, and can I answer now, David?
Yes.
Because, this is a very, very intricate point you raised, Now, if you ask a traditional Sri Vaishnavite, called Sri Vaishnava system as it is called, a traditional follower of Ramanuja, he may be born into the community who are traditionally following Ramanuja system, maybe not necessarily reading his works or studying Ramanuja philosophy, but follow certain rituals and practices. They will not be happy if you tell them that Ramanuja's devotional disciplines are okay at the preparatory stage, so that your mind will be ready for Advaita. They may not agree with you, because remember that I'm taking the whole thing as a kaleidoscope. It's just a panorama of the evolution of different devotional philosophical systems in India. So that's my approach. If I were a Ramanuja follower, traditional follower, I won't even listen to your question, because they consider it's a terrible sacrilege. But I tell you, Swami Vivekananda had solved this problem. And I can repeat, Swamiji says, we begin with Dvaita, we move towards Advaita through Vishishtadvaita. So we begin with Madhva, then next stage is Ramanuja, and eventually we culminate in Advaita. There's always there's an evolution from many to one, and also from the idea of God as a creator, as a controller, as a giver of all that we need, to the idea that God is, as a divine principle, is present in all of us. Again, even as a concept, this was very satisfactory. It was found to be very satisfactory by many philosophers, not only in India but also in Western world, in 19th century, 20th century. So that's why if you read Shankaracharya's works, devotional poetry, you find all these devotional ecstasy is found in Shankaracharya's devotional books. But when they interpret Shankaracharya's works, they scrupulously they carefully exclude every single devotional poem of Shankara. This is something maybe news to you. If you look at the works of those who criticize Shankaracharya, including Ramanuja, they totally exclude all the more than 68 very important devotional poetical works of Shankara. Ramanuja was born in Sriperumbudur. Very near to his place there is one of the most wonderful temples, Devi temples, that is Kamaksha temple. It was Shankaracharya who installed the Sri Chakra, and he was the one who laid out the rules for the rituals and worship in that temple, in Kanchi Kamaksha temple. So if wherever you go, it is very difficult to see any important temple where Shankaracharya had not gone and prayed the deity and recited some ecstatic devotional hymn. All these devotional hymns are totally excluded by Ramanuja, Sudarasana Suri and all his followers, not to speak of many others. Instead, you know what they do? They interpret Shankara as the inventor of the new mechanism called Maya. So Mayavad, they consider that Advaita is Mayavada. They think that the central theme of Advaita is Maya. It's absolutely false, absolutely wrong. So, this is very interesting. So, if you ask a typical Ramanujite, he will not agree with you. But the point is, Ramanuja could have just walked a few miles from his native home and gone to Kamaksha temple. He would have understood the glory of Shankara. I told you the historical background. Yadava Prakasha was, to begin with, Ramanuja's guru who was teaching Advaita. Yadava Prakasha was a very dry intellectual, die-hard Advaitin, who may have totally neglected the devotional element of Shankaracharya's work as a whole. So Ramanuja revolted against one mantra found in Chandogya Upanishad, which we will discuss later, like Kapyasam, Pundarika. That's a very well-known incident. Ramanuja started shedding tears at the interpretation of a mantra by his own teacher, and then he argued with his teacher. So all this happened, but Ramanuja could have easily walked a few miles and reached the temple of Kanchi, and then he would have been reminded of the visit of the great Shankaracharya into that temple. So it's one of the most wonderful temples in India, one of the most ancient temples. Each temple is like a big town, and not like a big complex. So this is a very, very important thing to remember. So please remember one important thing. In all these dialectical, philosophical conflicts, conflicting philosophical systems, you have to remember all the non-Advaitic philosophers carefully excluded all the devotional poems of Shankaracharya. They never thought what this, you see, what the Acharya was writing, mother is only refuge. Gadistum Tumega Bhavani, Shiva Paradakshmavana Stotra, Devi Paradakshmavana Stotra. I mean, all, if I committed some wrong, please excuse me, mother. So you find all this. So anyway, so this is an interesting subject. I think, did I answer your question?
Yes, Swami, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Swamiji, Namaskar. In the last couple of sessions and in today's session also, you pointed out some subtle differences between bhakti and prapatti.
Yeah.
So, when you look at Sri Ramakrishna's practices, would you categorize them more as bhakti or prapatti?
Yeah. In Sri Ramakrishna, you find everything. Sri Ramakrishna was like everything. Practically, there is anything, there is very difficult to find anything that Sri Ramakrishna did not refer to or did not practice. in some, you find, see, Sri Ramakrishna talked to the Girishchandra Ghosh, who was actually a profligate and a drunkard, but was certainly a man of intense devotion, intensity of mind and emotions. But Sri Ramakrishna asked him to practice prapatti, though he was not actually, technically not ready for that. But Sri Ramakrishna found in him some quality. He was totally sincere. The total and 100% sincerity could be the result of a lot of spiritual disciplines he may have practiced in his previous life. So, for example, he was always drinking, was drunkard. Sri Ramakrishna asked him to take the name of God once in the morning and then before going to bed. He said he won't be able to do that. At least in the morning when he gets up, he said he won't be able to do that. Finally, Sri Ramakrishna told him, you give your entire responsibility to me. Now, and he did that, and it really worked. Now, really, for normal people who have not practiced a lot of spiritual disciplines in their past life, the prapatti doesn't work like that. You may say, I give everything to the Lord, but your identity with your own individual personality, that doesn't disappear with a verbal proclamation of prapatti or self-surrender. It never happens. It really never happens. Though in the Ramanuja system there is this, this giving responsibility to, it is that the mechanism really doesn't work any more than the confessions in a church. Confession to be genuine is a rebirth. You say it is not a license renewal program. A person who confesses, he will be reborn. It's a rebirth. If you read Augustine's confession, it's a rebirth. It never happens to normal people. Oh God, I give you everything. Next moment, our own identity re-emerges. So this problem, serious problem is there. But in Girishchandra Ghosh's case, he completely forgot his own identity. He tried to drink, he could not drink again. He had to become a saint. There was no other way. Sri Ramakrishna caught him by, let's say, so strongly that Girishchandra Ghosh lost his own freedom. Actually, in the prapatti ideal, giving up one's own identity or losing one's own complete freedom, that's an important characteristic of true, genuine prapatti. But it can really happen only to an advanced soul. Girishchandra Ghosh was an advanced soul, but born in this life, in that particular life, as a drunkard. So, it's just like, sometimes in a pool of water, there may be pure water below, but just a thin layer of dust or something on the surface. If you remove that, you get pure water. So that's what happened to Girishchandra Ghosh. In the case of normal people, the Sharanagati or self-surrender doesn't really always work. That's because they may make a verbal proclamation, but it doesn't go beyond the verbal level. The old samskaras will reassert and bring us back. And again you do. Again you are everything good. Again, but remember, according to Ramanuja, he points out this swatantriyam, the total, there is a stage where you lose your freedom completely, but that's not a state of slavery, it's a blissful state of one's identity with the Lord. The blissful state, which happens to many mystics, many great devotees.
So, Ramanuja, is there any, how advanced Ramanuja was as far as his spiritual experiences and did Ramakrishna Thakur, did he mention him in some places?
Yeah, no. Sri Ramakrishna mentions, actually he mentions to be Ramanuja system, Shankara system, and once there's one sentence, according to Shankaracharya, this whole world is, Maya, everything is unreal, and Brahman is only reality. Ramanuja system, God is the protector. That much Sri Ramakrishna says. Yeah.
No, spiritually, as far as spiritual experience goes, how far Ramanuja, whether he was a Brahmagga or do we have any information about that?
You are talking about Brahmajnani, but Ramanuja won't take it. He doesn't accept that kind of Brahmajnana that you're talking about. See, Ramanuja was a prapanna, a person who has surrendered himself to the Lord. And that's it. That's actually, in a way, when Sri Ramakrishna says, you don't want to be a fly that falls into a pot full of honey. You rather sit outside and lick a little, enjoy a little honey. So Ramanuja doesn't say that. But again, a bhakta, a prapanna, he feels a lot of inner bliss, inner serenity, inner joy. There's no doubt about it. Ramanuja was certainly a great bhakta. Yeah, no doubt. So thank you for interesting discussion. Some of these discussions may appear to be a bit pedantic and academic, but then that's what is meant to be, a little that way. So,
Maharaj, I have just a quick question in terms of popularity in contemporary times of Madhvacharya and Ramanuja.
Yeah.
Would you say that these devotional followers of Ramanuja would be more numerous?
Yeah, that's true. Ramanuja's system was followed by many devotional philosophers in North India, not only in southern states where he was born, Nimbarka, Vallabha and others, some way. Madhva system was linked to the school of Chaitanya Vaishnava system. So that's very important. So numerically, maybe because from the middle of 20th century, the Vaishnava system, which migrated to Western countries, popularized Chaitanya Vaishnava system. So frequently they refer to Madhvacharya more frequently than Ramanuja. That is true, because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's system philosophically is allied to Madhva system than Ramanuja system. Because Ramanuja is less exclusive and less emphatic and more broad-based. You can find Ramanuja is very humane. Madhvacharya sometimes uses certain words in the Madhva literature which you may not consider as a compliment in their system. They call, these Mayavadins are like nihilist, like a Buddhist, and they use like the Maya. They use certain expressions. But in the Ramanuja system, you don't find anything. You don't find. It's a little more mild and more moderate in their response to. So it has its own greatness and attraction. But one important thing to remember is, outside of Ramanuja, there were not too many scholars in the Ramanuja system who could be compared with the great dialecticians who emerged in the Madhva system. So I can give an outline of this history of dialectical confrontations during the post-Shankarite period. See, after Shankaracharya, a large number of outstanding scholars, dialecticians and philosophers emerged, and they were great saints also in the Shankara system, including his own disciple Padmapada wrote Panchapadika, which it was the beginning of Panchapadika Vivarana, which was written by Prakashatmayedi. It continued as a succession of scholars. And again, Sudeshwaracharya wrote Vartika, and that also Vartika Prasthana, another school. Then Vajaspati Mishra wrote Bhamadi, that again was the beginning of a new trend, Bhamadi Prasthana, another school. And this trend continues right up to continuously. It continued right up to 16th century, up to Madhusudana Saraswati, who was one of the greatest names of that era, who was a close follower of Shankaracharya. So they wrote such outstanding books which are still being studied and taught, taking whole lifetime as a devotional exercise, as a philosophical exercise. Now, to refute in their own way, to contradict the views of Advaita scholars, a number of scholars emerged from Madhva system, Jayatirtha, Vaditirtha, Vyasatirtha, and so on. That many scholars did not emerge in the Ramanuja system. The Ramanuja system, actually there were only two very great outstanding scholars, only two. One is Vedanta Desika, the other one is Sudarsana Suri. Vedanta Desika wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita Bhashya of Ramanuja. Sudarsana Suri wrote a commentary on the Sri Bhashya, Bhashya on Brahma Sutra of Ramanuja. Outside of these two, there were, but not anyone comparable to the great dialecticians of Madhva system. Madhva system produced so many outstanding dialecticians, who can, in some respects, who can be compared with the great scholars of Advaita system. Though I don't think there was anyone comparable to Madhusudana in the Madhva system. I mean, we are talking about the post-Shankarite dialectical literature, philosophical literature. Okay. So, thank you, Bobby, for that question. Sometimes these questions will help me to explain things which otherwise would be irrelevant when I put in the body of main lecture, So when questions come, it's very helpful. So thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.